I'm just going to...
Okay, I think it's going to go live. It's saying end broadcast, so I think it's live. Yeah, we're live. So good morning, Sariah. How are you?
Morning. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. It's been a really interesting week, and we've had lots of wonderful discussions. So hopefully we've been sharing lots of content that will be really supportive for our family. So that's always lovely. And thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you. So I'll start with our usual kind of trigger warning and introduction. So today we're joined in the studio by Sariah, a bereavement midwife for the NHS. Sariah is a dedicated and hardworking midwife who practices clinically and supports parents during the most devastating times of their lives, before, during, and shortly after the loss of their baby. Sariah champions the work that Oscar's Wish offer within the trust and signposts families that need support to a range of charities, groups and services, as well as us here at Oscar's Wish Foundation. We totally understand how devastating losing a baby or babies can be, and we want to extend our sincerest understanding and support to anyone walking this journey too. So obviously our chat today does come with a trigger warning, and some of the content that we may discuss may be upsetting, and we really, really want to ask people to take care of their hearts. People know where they're at their journey, and if it's too difficult, to maybe come back to catching up with this later if it's a bit of a tricky day. I mean, Baby Loss Awareness Week itself is a really huge opportunity to shine a spotlight, but it can also be really, really impactful for parents. So we ask everyone to make an informed decision as to whether they want to continue watching. So today, we're going to be chatting about your role as a midwife and as a bereavement midwife. It would just be really lovely to know how long you've been a midwife and a bereavement midwife, and what your role involves, really.
Okay, so I've been a clinical midwife for almost 4 years now. So I came to the profession quite late in life, I guess, the youngest person. And then I've been in the bereavement role for about 18 months now. It came about quite unexpectedly when I cared for a member of my family who had a bereavement, and it just felt, I don't know whether it can be a good fit, but it just felt like something that I felt I could do a good job with. And then the role for bereavement midwife came up for our trust, and I was fortunate enough to get the role. It's a weird thing because people ask me how I feel about it and whether I like my job or not, and I absolutely love my job. Which is it would be nice if I didn't have this role, if there wasn't a need for a bereavement midwife in any trust, but there is, sadly, and it's just something that I feel quite passionate about, and I hope that I do a good job. But the people I look after are the people who can tell you whether I do a good job or not. But I really love my role.
It's an incredible position to be in, because I mean, growing up, you learn about life and death, and we learn that babies come into the world, and at no point does anyone tell you during growing up or secondary school, college, that some babies don't make it into the world. So naively, when Oscar died, or kind of the lead up to him being unwell, I didn't know that there was a chance he wouldn't survive. So I didn't really even know there was a role such as yours as a bereavement midwife. So it was really incredible to know that role existed, but in a very sad way, because nobody ever thinks that when they fall pregnant that they will not be bringing their baby home.
No.
So we're incredibly grateful that there is that role, and that you are filling that role incredibly. It must just be such a because babies aren't supposed to die, are they? That's not how life's supposed to be. So I can imagine that role must be almost like you must feel quite honoured to do that role, but also wish, like you say, that it wasn't needed.
Yeah, it is a huge privilege, because you meet families on what is often the worst journey that they will ever take. And so you have a huge responsibility to carry them, because as a midwife, I have the power, if you like, to make that journey worse or better. And when I say I can make it worse, it's about the language that I use, the words that I say, the safe space that I can create. And if you don't do that sensitively and appropriately, then you can make things worse. And so there is a huge responsibility to make sure that families are carried, to make that journey just a little bit easier. And that's what my role is to make that journey just a little bit easier.
Of course, and huge amounts of compassion and empathy. It must take a lot of energy to do your job well and feel, because we all, I mean, there's a huge spotlight this week with the stress and the pressure that midwives are under, no breaks, long working hours, and not enough midwives to kind of fill the roles. And with the added then pressure that you are then supporting a family in the most devastating time of their life, with all of those added things going on for yourself, to have that compassion and empathy over and above all, it must take a lot of energy.
It is I never feel exhausted from like emotionally exhausted from my role. Midwife means with woman, and it doesn't matter to me whether I'm caring for somebody who will have a positive outcome or somebody who has a very sad outcome. My role is to support that woman or birthing person, through that journey. But I am a human being, and as a midwife, I am, quite empathetic. I have children of my own, and I've had a loss of my own, and so I wouldn't be very good at my job if I didn't feel some of that pain. And I would be lying if I didn't say occasionally I cry with families. And I think that's okay and it's appropriate as long as I'm not the loudest person in the room, and I don't make it about me. But I haven't found in my experience that families are upset that their midwife is upset for them, because I don't know what sort of person could watch that sadness unfold, especially in the birthing room, without feeling devastation for the pain that is being heaped upon that couple or that family. So I'm really good at getting in my car and having a good old cry. And that is quite cathartic for me, and it means that I can then get back to that kind of helps me to just kind of put everything in place. And I wouldn't do my job very well if I was constantly sobbing and being sad about. I mean, I am always sad about the families that I care for, but I have a role to perform, and so they need me to be strong and efficient and being able to do my job effectively, so that they don't have to worry about certain things that I can help them with.
Yes, of course. It is a huge role, and obviously these roles of the bereavement midwife have changed over time. We know from families members that we talk to that 20, 30 years ago, the bereavement midwife role, sorry, put my teeth back in, wasn't even that wasn't a role, and things were very different. So kind of bereavement care has changed massively over the years. Have you seen a change in the time that you've been working with the trust, or has there been lots of things you've tried to kind of put in place or things you're working on as the bereavement midwife?
I mean, I was really lucky because Shelley, who you know very well, and I'm sure some of your families know Shelley as well, really well, she left a really fantastic kind of operation in place. She had set up some amazing things, and so she was really easy to follow, and I haven't changed very much of what Shelley has done. One of the things we're just about to start is feedback. I don't think we kind of try to gain feedback. We get feedback from families, but sometimes that's about poor care or really good care, And
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be helpful for us to be able to reach out to all families, and whether they with a kind of a feedback. I don't want to say questionnaire, but that is pretty much what it is, like a feedback form, so
Yes.
that and people would not be obliged to do it if they didn't want to, because I understand we're thinking that we probably wouldn't send them out for sort of maybe 3 or 6 months,
Yeah.
and for some families that might be quite triggering to have to revisit the care that they had in hospital. But we can't improve the service if
Yes.
we don't know what families thought about the service that they received.
Right.
And
Yes.
we always should be looking to make it the best service that we possibly can. And so hopefully that's something that we'll be bringing in the next couple of months. We also now do certificates of life for babies under 24 weeks, which we hadn't had before, which Oscars Wish very kindly provide for us. Because when I kind of started the role, I felt it was really sad that some families left the hospital without any kind of official recognition that their baby existed. And I felt it was really important to acknowledge that life. They may never have breathed earthside, but they are very much real and a part of a family's life. And so we offer families a certificate of life, which has the trust logo on it, and it's just an acknowledgement from the hospital that baby existed. And I'm really happy that they're in place. And some families choose not to have them, and that's absolutely okay. We're always guided by what families want, but lots of families do have them. And I know that a few families that I've looked after have put them in little frames with maybe footprints and photographs. So for some people, they're really important.
It's so that validation and acknowledgement is so vital for many people in this journey, because when that's not kind of standard procedure, across the country for every person that loses a baby before 24 weeks, it is really, really hard that isn't available everywhere. When as a parent, really, that's what you would hope was available, because that acknowledgement and that validation that your baby is real, they did exist, they did grow in your womb for however long their gestational life was, and it's so lovely to hear the feedback from families that are so grateful for that. So thank you for putting that in place, because it is so important, and it is so powerful for people to have that, whether it's in a frame, in a memory box, and just having that acknowledgement. So thank you, and thank you for all the hard work that you as a bereavement midwife and your team, and I know your wonderful MCA do, because it's so, from our perspective, obviously we wish our charity wasn't needed, like you wish your role wasn't needed, but sadly it is. And to know that the families coming through to us have had the best care that they possibly could have had, in the circumstances that they could have had, in with the experience that they're facing, is really reassuring, because we know, we've worked closely with you now, we know what we're expecting, and I think it's really easy for us to then pick up kind of where the hospital leaves, if that makes sense. We can then say, we can help now, we can offer these things, and I think it works really well for us to work so closely together, because like I said in the intro, you champion the work that all charities do, and we're very lucky that we can work so closely with you, and we're really, really grateful. And I think families feel that continuity of care. They feel reassured when they can say, my bereavement midwife was, and then suggest a name, and we can say, oh yes, we know. So it makes them feel human, and it makes them feel less of just another person that's lost a baby, which is really, really powerful. So this week, for Baby Loss Awareness Week, our themes are kind of all over the place because of when we were available to have these chats, but one of the themes was looking at how those on the front line, yourselves, support families. So how do you work with your families? How do you provide that support for them?
Okay, so I, as a bereavement midwife, I'm informed if we know that a family is going to be coming to our unit for um, all sorts of reasons. A baby can die. You know, sometimes it's abnormalities that families have to make the hardest decision of their lives, and other times a baby just dies with no kind of explanation or rationale. So I'm often told about families that are coming in before they come to the hospital. And if I do get that information, I'll try to reach out to those families before they come, because it can, I mean, you know, it can be such a shock to hear that your baby has died and that you have to go to the hospital and that you have to birth that baby, and it can be kind of just numbing. And so decisions that you need to make in that position are just incredibly hard. So I'll just send a little text letting them know who I am, and if they've got any questions, they can reach out. I don't kind of hassle people and say, you know, I would never phone somebody straight off the bat,
Yeah.
because that can be quite triggering, you know, when I just pop up in the middle of their day. If I'm working clinically, I sometimes will look after a family in that intrapartum birthing period for them, but I don't always do that, because I have to sometimes feel like I have to protect myself, so that I try to not look after. I don't always look after bereavement cases on my clinical days, so that I can have a healthy balance between
Yes.
the sadness of midwifery and the joy of midwifery. I try to keep that balance, and my role then would be to support the clinical midwives in caring for those bereaved families, and answer any questions, because for some clinical midwives, it's a really daunting and difficult care that they're giving. We don't always feel really comfortable with death, and especially as midwives, you know, our job is supposed to be joyous, and watching families experience that joy of birth, and when you know that actually they're going to be experiencing real sadness, that can be quite scary for midwives. So my role is also to support the midwives in caring clinically for those families. And then moving on, I have to make sure that we provide the things that are really important to families, like making memories while they're still in the hospital, making sure that families have as much time as they need to spend with that baby, and you know, aching arms teddies, your absolutely gorgeous memory boxes. They're really important, and so my job is to make sure the midwives are talking about them and giving those things, because we don't want families leaving the hospital without them if they want them, and not everybody takes them, and that's fine, but most families do. And then my role kind of going forward from that point is just to kind of support them in the practicalities of what happens after a baby dies, and that's really challenging for everybody, to be fair, because nobody gets pregnant and then thinks, oh, I might have to plan a funeral. I might have to decide whether my baby is going to have a post-mortem or not. They're really, really challenging, horrible practicalities of what happens when a baby dies. And for some people, they can't go there. They don't want to talk about a funeral of a baby that they wanted to take home with them and expected to take home with them. So my role is to do that organising for them, to try to take that load off them if they need me to. For some, it's part of the grieving process and they want to be very involved and they want to do it by themselves, and I would encourage that. But for some people, it's just too traumatic, and my role is just to pick that up and have conversations with funeral directors and try to, you know, guide them and make sure that they're happy with the decisions they're making. And there's no judgment for me. So I do look after families who don't want anything to do with the cremation process or the burial process. And that's okay if that's what they need to do. That's absolutely fine. And the other, the other end of the spectrum is that people want to have a beautiful funeral with all of their family there to celebrate that baby's existence. And again, that's absolutely the right thing to do for that family. But then I don't just do practical stuff. I try to be as emotionally supportive as I possibly can, and I am there for families for as long as they need. So it's important to emphasize that it's not like well, you can have a bereavement midwife checking in on you for 3 months and then you're on your own. I still talk to women who had a loss 18 months ago and occasionally need to just dip in and talk about their grief and however, whatever they're feeling, and that's okay. I'm happy to talk to people for as long as they need, and I'll do house visits if people need me to go and just sit with them and create a safe space so that they can talk about their baby or talk about the things that they feel about them. So there's always a lot of guilt, I find, with women particularly, about why they weren't able to protect their baby, and so there's a lot of chatting about that, because obviously there's nothing to feel guilty about, but women like to, they're trying to find a reason often,
Yes.
and if that reason can sit on blame on their shoulders, then quite often they take that, and that's sad for me, because what could they have done?
Of course.
So that's what I do.
There's just so many strands and elements to your role that I don't think many people realise, which is why today is so important to let people know that. And I think in a conversation we had a little while ago, you mentioned that you also will attend a funeral if the family would like you to, and that's so lovely. That continuity of care and compassion is so. I could see how that would be really healing for a parent.
Yeah, I would. That's definitely what I would do. I do offer it to families, and some families definitely don't want me there. But other families, it's like a link between their birth experience and saying goodbye to their baby physically.
Yes.
And for some families, they don't want to attend a service, but they still want to have that service, and are very happy that I would go and be the representative for the family when it's too painful for them to do that. And then, maybe they'll want me to collect ashes and take them home for them, because that practicality, like we said, can be just so hard, that they can't physically get themselves to where they need to be to pick that beautiful baby up, and I'm very happy to do that. I basically will do whatever somebody needs me to do to make it easier for them.
It's such a huge role, and obviously aside from all of the the hand holding, the creating a safe space, all the practical side of things, there's obviously so much that you have to do within your role, admin wise, and that's also another element I think people don't always see, is the amount of paperwork and policies and procedures that you have to work under. So there's a huge amount to your role. So with bearing all of that in mind, what support is there for you as a midwife and for your team? Because like you said earlier, having your clinical role as well, and having that balance between the joy and sadness, which I totally get and can see how important and healthy that would be. What kind of support is there for you as midwives and for your team? Because it must, over time, I can see how it can take its toll. So what support is there for you?
So when I first applied for the role, there was no supervision in place. So you were a bereavement midwife, and that was the end of it. You didn't have any sort of pastoral care. And I sort of suggested that I probably wouldn't take the job unless there was supervision in place. I felt it was really important.
Yes.
And I was really lucky that the chaplain at Princess Royal Hospital, Sue, was very happy for me to go and sit with her every 6 weeks and just there for an hour and talk about and obviously everything, I would never talk about people's names or specifics, but there might be a case that's been particularly traumatic, or the family are really struggling, and that has when somebody is just always sad every time you speak to them, and you don't seem to be doing anything that will make them feel a little lighter, that can be really hard, because you can't be human and not, sort of absorb some of that sadness. So being able to go and talk to it in a completely confidential manner, knowing that whatever I say won't be discussed with anybody else, has been really healthy. And sometimes make her cry, which is a bit because it's difficult to talk about child death or baby loss with anybody really who has a heart, without it becoming an emotive subject, as it should be. If we're talking about a baby's dying and baby loss without feeling any emotion, then I wouldn't want to be that kind of person. But she's really brilliant, and I just sort of check in with her. And I'm also really lucky because the bereavement is now part of the governance team, whereas before it was just kind of a branch by itself. And my predecessor didn't have an amazing amount of support from the trust itself, but we have a couple of really brilliant senior midwives who I know that I can just pick up the phone and speak to them, or say, I don't know what to do with this particular issue, can you help me? And so there's a few heads in the team that are pretty brilliant. So I feel like I'm able to keep it really well balanced. I'm a year and a half in, and it has never felt overwhelming. I'm also quite a practical person, so I do this with my clinical roles as well. Even if I've had a really challenging shift, I am able to turn my phone off. So I'm very strict with my bereavement phone. When I finish my bereavement shift, so I turn my phone off. I do check it sometimes if I know that maybe somebody might reach out and want a little bit of support, and that's okay, because I don't do it all the time. But I think I need them to know that I'm there for them, but I also don't want them to be phoning me on a Sunday afternoon when I'm,
having some time downtime.
So I feel like I manage it, and I'm quite strict when I'm looking at my bereavement emails or phone.
That's really, really important, to not only kind of protect your heart, but also keep that balance, and for longevity as well, in order to not burn out and to be able to do this for a longer period of time. It is really, really important to keep. That's something I'm working on. I've still got to practice that a bit more. With my partner, I'm sure, will tell anyone 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm replying to emails. But that again, that is totally my choice. But like you say, when someone really needs you, and it can't be left. It has to be dealt with. So, and because we have a heart, because we have an understanding and want to support people with that compassion and empathy, it is really hard sometimes to put that phone down, turn the computer off. But I'm really, really pleased that you do have that more strict, and I'll keep working on that. So what was the other question? Oh, the other question I thought would be really nice to kind of round off our chat today was, I was saying earlier, there's a huge spotlight at the moment, and lots of petitions online to get the government to really have an understanding of the pressure that midwives are under, and in order to save more babies' lives, to put more focus on the need to be more proactive, and that there needs to be a bigger recruitment drive for midwives, a retention, opportunities, better support. So with your role, what do you think would help support your role further? What kind of things do you think you need?
So I think we need a band 7 bereavement midwife. I'm a band 6 bereavement midwife, and so there's some things that I probably shouldn't be doing, but so I don't just look after families. I have to attend panels that are very serious. So if we have a serious incident, or we have post-mortem review teams, and I'm on the panel for CDOT, which is a child death overview panel, and Embrace as well. And because we don't have a band 7 midwife, that role, that all of those very, very important jobs fall to myself and my counterpart in Brighton, Jules.
Yes.
And they're really time consuming. You know, we both only work 15 hours a week for bereavement. And that 15 hours a week should be just dedicated to the families that we care for, that we are looking after. But occasionally, you know, our time is taken up with meetings and panels and form filling. They're really important form filling.
Of course, yes.
Of course they are, but it would be great if somebody else was doing the more serious kind of serious paperwork.
Yeah.
And we could just get on with just looking after families.
Yes. So that would make a big difference, wouldn't it? It would take some of that pressure off and mean that was more of a kind of, like you say, a band 7 role, which would be incredible. And with
to be fair, they are working on it.
Amazing. Fingers crossed then. Fingers crossed. And like you say, all these things, they don't happen straight away, and we all know how much pressure the NHS is under, you know, with the amount of cost, you know, the cost it must cost to run. And so of course there will be changes and budget cuts and all sorts, but to know that it's something that is on the radar, it is great news, and for both yourself and Jules, but also for the role itself and bereavement care as a whole, because it has to get better. You know, we've made such a huge shift in such a short space of time that to then go back to kind of what it was many years ago would just be disastrous. And I know people like yourselves who are so passionate and dedicated would do everything to make sure that didn't happen. So it's great to know that there are things, you know, being discussed and maybe things that could come to fruition in the long term. So is there anything as a charity you think would be beneficial to support your role? I know whenever I ask anyone at the hospital, they always say, we need fans. We need more fans in the summer because it's so hot. And we need more sonographers and more scanning machines. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll kind of have a chat with the trustees and see what we can do. But I know we've got it on our radar to come and refurbish the room as and when kind of COVID allows. And obviously the room, sadly, you know, we need the room to not be being used. So that's obviously on our radar. But yeah, have a think. Let's use this time. I know we've been doing lots of fundraising this week to continue to support the counselling, which is great because we think we've got lots more families that can be funded. If there's anything you can think of, please do put that forward to us.
Thank you. I should just say though that our bereavement care is it is so benefited by the support that Oscar's Wish Foundation gives the hospital, gives the trust, you know, Brighton and Princess Royal. And I know that it's invaluable to the families that we look after. We, as a trust, do not offer any counselling. And so our families would leave us with, you know, nothing. And that's great for those who can afford to pay for counselling. But lots of our families can't. That's just a finance that is not possible for them. And so to know that everybody is treated the same and that they're able, if they want to access funding through, you know, through Oscar's Wish for counselling is just such a blessing for the families that we care for. And we only really get positive feedback about Oscar's Wish Foundation. So we're really grateful as bereavement midwives when we know that we're not going to run out of memory boxes or the duvet is spoilt and we can just say, Gemma, can we have a new duvet? And
yes, of course you can.
it just magically appears. So those things need to be funded by the trust, and that would mean that simply it wouldn't happen. We can't afford enough midwives, never mind the kind of beautiful touches that Oscar's Wish does for our bereavement suites. So we're really grateful.
That's really kind, and we wouldn't be able to provide any of those things if it wasn't for the amazing families, the supporters, everyone that champions the charity helps fundraise, raise awareness. So it is a real community effort for the benefit of families in Sussex. And you know, in time, we hope that those things can be a lot more abundance. But as we're kind of coming out of a pandemic now, everyone's, you know, being really sensible with funds, and but hopefully lots more fundraising and awareness raising over the coming years, to make sure that all of those things can continue to be facilitated. But thank you so much for your time today, Sariah. It's been really, really beneficial. And it's funny, in all the time I've known you, I've never actually understood your role in the depth that I feel I know now. So I know it would be really, really beneficial for lots of people, lots of our viewers.
I hope so.
Thank you. You can go and get some rest now after your night shift, bless you.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I didn't feel tired at all. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're really, really grateful. And it'd be lovely to chat to you, in the next few months and see if things are progressing and changing.
Lovely. Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you, Sariah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.